You know, a long time ago, I remember saying I couldn't see myself really getting into a gacha game. Whoops. You see, the reality behind that statement is that at the time I said it, most gacha games that were prominent and widely popular, in my eyes at least, looked kinda boring. They were all idle games. No, not that. Or wait, maybe. But never mind. Basically, they were mobile games in which you would set up a bunch of stuff and then you'd let the game play itself. And that's not really something I'm interested in. Also, it just so happened that pretty much the most popular one at the time was Fate Grand Order. And that was the biggest barrier for entry to me, because the extent of my knowledge on the Fate franchise extends to those videos that Giga made about it. And listen, I already fell into the VTuber rabbit hole. The Fate universe is way too scary for me right now. So for the longest time, I thought that's what gacha games were like, and I didn't even think about the gacha system in the first place. The games just weren't interesting to me from the get-go, and how the hell are you gonna get me into a game when I'm just not really that into its gameplay? Well, enter Genshin Impact. If you've been around this channel for a while now, you'd probably know that I really like Genshin. In the rare occasion that I decide to stream, it's the only game I ever play, and even outside of that, I log in every day for an hour or so to do my dailies, continue the quests I got on my list, and maybe even just relax and explore some more of the world. I've kind of fallen into a routine with Genshin after playing it since launch, and you know what? I'm fine with that. Yeah, you heard me right. I've been playing since launch and I still haven't gotten sick of it. Why, you ask? Fuck if I know. I think it has to do with the fact that I never play the game for long periods of time. I never rush any of the content and I always have something interesting to do. And even if I don't, I log in for 20 minutes or so to just do the daily chores and move on. I go do some other thing. I know that the title of this video may make it seem like I'm addicted to this game or something like that, but if I just called it I like Genshin, you probably wouldn't click on it. Genshin did what I thought was impossible. It got me into a gacha game, and it did so very easily, may I add. Before its release, it was already generating quite a bit of buzz for one particular reason. It looked like anime Breath of the Wild. In retrospect, that's kinda dumb. The similarities between the two games are just surface level. Sure, the game draws a lot of inspiration from Breath of the Wild, but the truth is that both games have completely different core gameplay loops. But even so, the attention that the game got thanks to the comparisons really ended up helping it. And it wouldn't have gotten me if it wasn't because of that, because anime Breath of the Wild sounds fucking sick, I'm not gonna lie. So the gameplay is the one thing that drew me in. It was completely unlike the image of gacha games I had at the time. This was a fully realized open world with beautiful and sprawling sceneries coupled with incredible music, charming and attractive characters, and a very fun elemental reaction system that is incredibly versatile in the way that it lets you mix and match characters together to create a whole bunch of ways to deal damage. In other words, a whole lot of ways to go oonga boonga, big number go brrrr. At its core, that is what Genshin is. You're gonna spend a lot of time with that battle system, you're gonna spend a lot of time exploring, doing puzzles, finding treasure, but you're also gonna spend a lot of time doing the typical gacha bullshit, including but not limited to grinding for hours on end. Or if you're reasonable, like me, you're gonna grind until you consider it acceptable and you don't get wiped across the floor. The thing is, Genshin is not a hard game, and it's not even a competitive one at that, so going at it with the mindset of min-maxing absolutely everything is just gonna make your life miserable. And now comes the part of the video that I'm gonna use to voice my biggest criticism of Genshin: artifacts. See, if I could use one word to describe the artifact system, it would be pain. Now, if you didn't know, in this game you build characters. It is an action RPG after all. You give them weapons, you level up their skills, and you gear them up according to the way you want to play them. And it is in that last part that Genshin basically tries to extend your playtime as much as possible. Artifacts are the gear that you give your characters. They can wear 5 pieces and they all serve to boost their stats and give them special abilities and effects unique to that set. On paper, the system's fine. There's enough variety in the sets that you can play a character in many different ways. Hell, some are very unorthodox. You would think they wouldn't really work, but they do, and they're fun even. The issue arises with the stats themselves. You get artifacts in domains, dungeons that throw a bunch of enemies at you and you just have to kill them. After winning, you spend your resin, you know, the typical stamina thingy that most mobile games have, and you get a bunch of artifacts. Great! Except that most of them are gonna suck dick because pretty much all of the stats are randomized. Every character has stats they prefer. Most DPS characters want crit rate and crit damage. Well, good luck getting those in your artifacts, buddy. It has been mathematically calculated that crit is the rarest stat to get in any of the pieces, and it is the most important one to get if you want to do significant damage. It would be one thing if that's where it ended, but oh boy does the pain keep going! Artifacts have a main stat and up to 4 substats. The main stat depends on each piece, and on these artifacts it can be any of these, and these ones always have attack and HP, and then the substats are completely random. You can level up artifacts to increase their stats. The highest tier can go up to level 20, with the main stat going up each level. And every 4 levels, get this, either you get another substat if the artifact has less than 4 of them, or on the contrary, a random substat will get an upgrade. These are the chances that the same substat will get upgraded X amount of times. Getting 5 upgrades is practically impossible. And as if that wasn't bad enough, each substat can fall under 1 out of 4 tiers that determine how high the base number is. For example, on a 5-star artifact at level 0, crit rate can be 2.72, 3.11, 3.50, or 3.89. And every upgrade, it can go up by 1 of those values. So theoretically, the highest possible value for a crit rate substat is 3.89 times 6. And that is assuming that the artifact had 4 substats at level 0. Each upgrade went to crit rate, and each upgrade was the highest possible value. That's it. Math class is over, folks. I hope that by illustrating in this much detail how the artifact system works, it shows just how bullshit it all is. You can spend hours, days, even months looking for a certain piece that just won't happen. And I would know. I spent more time than I'd like to admit farming the stupid Crimson Witch domain for a crit circlet for my Hutao that never came. And to this day, I have never gotten a crit piece from that set. It is incredibly discouraging. So knowing when to stop and just make do with what you got is imperative if you actually want to enjoy your time with the game. Because as vocal as I am about hating artifacts, I still really enjoy the game. Every patch there's new things to do, new characters to try out, gamble responsibly you idiots, new team compositions to try out, every now and then there's new areas to explore, puzzles to solve, secrets to discover, side quests, character quests, hangouts, different challenges, game modes, Jesus fucking Christ, there's so much stuff. One bad thing really just isn't enough to ruin this game for me, especially since I try to stay away from said bad thing as much as possible. But also, I'm not a blind lover of the game. There are many more issues and irks that I have with the game, but my goal with this video wasn't to scrutinize all of the flaws in Genshin, except artifacts. I really wanted to get all that out of my chest. No, other people have done that way better than I could ever do. Go watch those videos if that's what you want to hear. All I wanted to do was, you know, just share my story, why I fell into this game and why I like it, despite everything that might be going against it. And if I had to pinpoint one thing that absolutely keeps me coming back to Genshin, is the lore and the story. I'd say that the story is usually nothing to write home about. It's got some high highs and some low lows, but overall it's a pretty enjoyable ride. Even if Paimon can get on your nerves from time to time, for fuck's sake, I know what's going on, you don't have to explain it every time, Paimon! But behind the main story lies perhaps the most interesting aspect of Genshin, the world of Teyvat. Teyvat is the continent the game takes place in, and every region that we explore reveals quite a bit about the world. There's tons of hidden information in all of the flavor text, and honestly, the secrets that they're hiding from us about stuff like the fall of Khaenri'ah, the Abyss Order, the Fatui, the Heavenly Principle, Celestia, and the fucking gods, that is what makes me want to keep playing. It's the promise that someday all of the loose ends will be tied, twists will be revealed, the truth of the world will be uncovered, our journey will come to an end. That is not to say that the story within each region is bad, not at all. Hell, individual arcs centering around one specific character tend to be some of my favorite stories in the game, and sometimes they have absolutely nothing to do with the main quest. Even if the main storyline doesn't advance much in a given patch, you can still be certain that at least something interesting is gonna be happening. Just look at the most recent Golden Apple Archipelago event. I didn't think it would be something important, I just wrote it off as a fun little summer adventure, and if it was just that, I would have been perfectly fine too. But we got so much stuff. More Kazuha development, an entire arc centered around Fischl, some incredibly poignant moments with Mona, and even Xinyan got her moment to shine. Not much of that had to do with the main quest aside from some not so subtle foreshadowing, but damn was it fun and interesting either way. And while it is great that we get stuff like this every patch, a part of me wishes that we'd get more content relating to the main story. As it stands right now, it seems we will get one new region every year, with Inazuma coming out last year and Sumeru coming this year, which means that we would only be seeing the end of the main story in 4 years at the very minimum, going off of the Teyvat chapter trailer. And yeah, it's Teyvat chapter. Nothing is stopping Hoyoverse of ending this story and moving on to another continent for like 10 more years. At least. So my desire to see the end of this story will take a good while. However, in order to quench my desire for more story, I had to go back. I had to go to what came before Genshin. And what came before was Honkai Impact 3rd. I know I mentioned the thing about Genshin being anime Breath of the Wild as the reason why I started playing, but in reality I had heard of its existence long before that, because I was aware of Honkai's existence first. Some anime-tubers I watched were regularly sponsored by the game, and the animated cutscenes were quite popular even outside of the game. And the funny thing is that I actually considered playing Honkai at some point, but the only thing that held me back was that my phone couldn't run it. And another funny thing is that I didn't even realize that it was a gacha game. My preconceptions about all gachas being just like Fate Go were so ingrained in my brain that the thought of Honkai being one of them never even crossed my mind. Eventually, because of Honkai's popularity, I thought that Genshin could be quite good, and it was, so I kept playing it. But also, in the back of my mind, I kept thinking that maybe I could get into Honkai too. Ultimately, I took the plunge for 2 reasons. One, I saw that it came out on Steam, so it was easy to just download it and give it a go. And yes, I still play on Steam, I'm sorry. And 2, I had heard that the world of Genshin and the world of Honkai were actually connected. They're both part of the same multiverse, and I love shit like that. I'd always seen theories that people made about the possible connections between the 2 games and how the answers to some questions in Genshin might actually be in Honkai, and I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff, so I just had to get into Honkai to see what it was all about. So in reality, I got into Honkai because of its story, and now that I am fully caught up with it, I can say with full certainty that it is absolutely 100% worth it. That is, if you have the patience to dive deep into it, because otherwise it's probably not gonna make a lot of sense. Honkai's story requires a lot of investment, and not the monetary kind, but time. By that I mean that the story is very expansive and complex. It's gotten to the point where recently the devs added recaps and links to complementary content within the chapter selector itself, because on top of what happens in the game itself, there is a metric fuck ton of information that is tucked away in this complementary content. These being manga and visual novels, and it's nothing like Genshin, because that only has 1 manga and it's just a prequel to the main story, and that's it. Honkai on the other hand has dozens of manga, ranging from interesting but technically not mandatory to absolute essential viewing. I would know this kind of stuff because initially I was just playing the game and it got to a point where I was very confused about everything, and it sure as hell didn't help that the beginning of the game is all over the place. So I went scouring through the internet to find explanations about what the fuck was happening, and I stumbled upon this neat little site that has a story guide to help you follow the story of Honkai in a more cohesive and thorough way, organizing every single piece of relevant content in a very easy to follow fashion, because in their words themselves, Honkai Impact 3rd is a story first and the game second. And let me tell you something, that is accurate. You can tell by playing the game that HOYO-Verse really cares about the story of Honkai. It feels like it's their baby, and the game itself is just a way to get the story out there. And that's not to say that the game is bad, not at all, but you can clearly tell where their focus is. It seems as if in every patch there's something going on with the story. Since I've started playing, there have been 0 patches where there wasn't anything closely related to the main story in one way or another, and that is exactly what I was lacking with Genshin. And on top of that, it's a really good story. The investment needed might be quite high, but again, I assure you, it really is worth it, because the story pays off your investment in fucking spades. Not many stories have made me cry in my 25 years of living. Honkai is one of them. And I didn't just tear up, I ugly cried like a motherfucker. HOYO-Verse does this shit really fucking well. The game itself is really action-packed. It's an intense and fast hack and slash, and the music really goes with it. It's bangers all around. But then all of a sudden, the story gets depressing, everything goes to shit, and just when you thought you lost all hope, they hit you with the wave goodbye to the past when That right there is the summary of what you can expect with the story of Honkai. So far, I've only spoken about the story, and honestly, that's mostly what I wanted to talk about. Honkai is a very different game to Genshin. There are big similarities in certain aspects. The game is still sort of an ARPG, but it has less focus on the RPG part. Yes, you build the characters that you get, but there's way less freedom with it, because every new character comes with tailor-made gear. And sure, there are other options for gear, but the results are almost always less than ideal. At the very least, there's very little RNG involved in gearing. If you get the weapon, then the stigmas, those are kind of like the artifacts, your character is most likely going to be good. There are affixes that you can roll for each stigma that can add more buffs to your character, but in my casual experience, it hardly matters much. And there is the biggest thing. I am a casual player. And what does that mean? Well, it means a lot of stuff. Remember when I said that Genshin isn't competitive? Well, Honkai is. There are many different game modes that reward you with points depending on how well you do, and those points are tallied up on a leaderboard. So if you want that competitive experience, Honkai is probably your kind of game. In my case, it isn't. At all. Also, I suck dick at this game. I struggled very hard to get to the point where I am now, which is a point where I don't suffer much with any of the game modes and I get sufficient rewards, because that's another thing. The better you are at the game, the better your rewards will be. But most importantly, you will get more crystals that you use to roll for characters. So that's the kind of game that Honkai is, and as for every different game mode, they all play very differently, and so does every character. There's a meta that is constantly shifting, which means that older characters are mostly useless and newer characters are all the rage, which means that to stay on top of things, you need to first have a deep understanding of how the game works so that you're prepared for whatever challenges come next, and second, you need to roll for every new meta character and their gear so that your scores can stay as high as possible. In other words, Honkai is a very complex game, and also I don't think it's very free-to-play friendly. Do keep in mind that this is from a player that barely engages in the more competitive aspects of the game, and also doesn't understand every single thing about the gameplay. And that might seem crazy considering I've played this damn game for over 400 hours now, but it's true. Actual veteran, experienced players will probably tell you that even after 100 hours, you're still a beginner. And to be fair, you can have a better understanding of the gameplay than me at that point. I'm just too lazy to study everything. Hell, I can't even bring myself to read all of the skills of the characters, which is probably why I gravitate to Genshin's gameplay more, because it's far more simple, not to mention the lack of competitiveness. That being said, I still enjoy Honkai's gameplay when I'm not suffering. It's a very fun hack and slash, provided you do at the very least as much work as I did to understand how it works. And if you like these complex and deep games where having a better understanding of its systems and the synergy between characters, you'll probably enjoy it even more so than me. But I'm happy just surviving and getting enough crystals to roll for characters that I like. Screw the competitive parts. Thank God, at the very least, that's a viable way to play. Especially since, as we've established, I'm in this for the story, really. The best part is that if you have even less energy than I do to spend time on those other game modes and you just want to experience the story, you barely even have to touch them. Most of the story chapters are played with trial characters, which means that you don't even have to use the ones that you've collected and built. Though to be fair, that can be a turnoff for some people, I get it. And the chapters themselves aren't even that hard. Sure, there might be a special challenge here and there, but most of the time they don't have big story content behind them. So it's perfectly fine to just log in whenever there's a new story update and play play just that. That way, the people that enjoy the challenging gameplay and the competitive aspect get to have their fun, and us who just love the story can focus on that. We can all play the way we want. And that is my story with these two games. I'm not really addicted, I just love them a whole lot for different reasons, and I just wanted to share a little bit of that with you all. And hell, maybe I've convinced you to give them a shot. And I know one thing I didn't really touch on is the gacha part, funnily enough, but I can't really talk in big length about that because I barely have any experience with how other gachas work. I know that Genshin has a petty system that lets you get pretty much any future character you might want, provided you save up and plan your spending accordingly. And that's way more than other gachas that I've heard, and in my experience, I've only ever paid for the battle pass to get those juicy rewards, and that's basically just to make the grind a little less tedious. And I didn't even get that many of them, I only bought 4 of them since launch, and I've never felt encouraged to spend more money. But I do admit that I have a lot of self-control. I make do with what I've got, and I don't get too upset if it doesn't work out. And it usually doesn't because I have shit luck.
Fucking course.
And with Honkai, I'm the same. I have spent a little bit more money on that one though. I bought the battle pass 7 times, and not even the highest tier of it. Though that one does have a lot of rewards, far more useful than just to alleviate the grind. I've gotten really good weapons and gear out of those passes, and Honkai even has many more ways to spend money that I really don't even want to get close to. In total, I've spent around 70 bucks on Honkai and 40 on Genshin, and I'm doing pretty well on them, so make of that what you will. So I'll keep playing these games because at the end of the day, I'm still having fun with them and I'm not getting bored. Who knows, maybe one day that'll happen and I'll move on. Maybe I'll play one of those Genshin-likes that are in development, like Wuthering Waves or Arknight's Enfield. They seem cool. Or maybe I'll just switch over to one of those other HOYO games whenever they come out. Honkai Star Rail does seem quite interesting with the turn-based combat. God damn it, it's got artifacts too. And well, there's also Zenless Zone Zero. That one looks really cool. Oh, for fuck's sake!